right, take it away, Sarah.
Hello. Today, I'm going to be looking at ways to view reality and how that impacts research and how they do their research, historically and today. So first, we're looking at the definition of ontology and how it affects research. In a nutshell, it's the study of the nature of reality. So to use a more series of unfortunate events definition format, ontology is a word that here means how academics choose to understand things. Over time, academics have seen reality in different ways. For a large portion of history, many academics have had a positivist mindset. So we're going to look at positivism first. It's the idea that reality is an objective truth with a capital T, and it is, because of that, it's something that we absolutely can know and measure in its entirety. Positivists believe in completely removing bias, and that's the only way you can discover truth with a capital T. And this is true of a lot of research today as well. But at some point, people said, wait a minute, we agree with most of this, but post-positivism says reality is out there and we can see it, but maybe we can't measure all of it. And bias does exist. Yes, you should try to remove your bias to see the truth with a capital T, but we acknowledge it does exist. So positivism and post-positivism are pretty similar, slightly different shades of this idea of an objective truth with a capital T that you can measure. So a much wilder deviation of thought appears. This is constructivism. Reality is not an objective truth, but a subjective one. Reality is built by people's mutual understanding. So this is much wilder. Instead of objective, we have people construct reality. And this makes bias important because bias is how we view reality. So everyone's bias is unique, individual, and counts towards what is reality. So this is around the 1960s, 70s, 80s. We have these things, the paradigm wars, and this big argument between academics. Positivism versus interpretivism. Is reality absolute or context dependent? So there's this big battle going on. A little bit of time passes, and in the 90s, we see more individual branches of interpretivism. The one I picked to show with this small presentation is critical theories, because they impact a lot of research and ideas today. So for instance, feminism, queer theory, these are all critical theories which look at power dynamics and how they impact our subjective reality. So things have calmed down. Many, many decades have passed. There's still a little bit of argument between positivist ideas and research and the more constructivist ideas, but for the most part, things have mellowed out, and they realize we can use ways of working between our different fields. So for instance, biology, is more of a positivism kinds of ways of working with research. You can see and measure, whereas critical theory is great for something like politics. You really want to look at you want to see the power dynamics there. You'll need more of a constructivist view nowadays for the way we research education, etc., etc. So the Buddha says, choose the middle path. And for the most part, we do now. This slide is just to let you know that all those gorgeous slides you saw, I did not do. Copy them. I didn't want to take credit. Okay. So I think that about covers the ideas between the objective and the subjective. This is a fun slide where I picked these characters in Star Trek to kind of show the differences between these value systems. So you have the Vulcan who loves logic, and you disengage your emotions completely, and that's how you find truth. Whereas you have someone more like Captain Sisko, who's the constructivist, that human contextual, right? He is not the same like Captain Picard. He has a lot of more human interaction rather than no bias at all. So I'm going to leave you with two questions, which is the where to take this. How could approaching certain subjects in research using these different mindsets change how that research is conducted? And do academic researchers as ways of thinking, these mindsets, and the research that follows, affect society's way of thinking, or vice versa? Remember, this comes out around the 60s, 70s, 80s. Is there some sort of relationship?
Woo! Yay!
Woo!
Woo!
All right. What a way to set the table. A lot of different ways to go with that. I know we have a lot of speakers coming from all across, a lot of attendees coming from all across the spectrum here, with greater comfort level in some of these. So does anyone have questions for Sarah?
The way that you can raise your hand, you can either, let's see, I think we have few enough people if, let's see, can I stop sharing screen? Sarah, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
Okay, and then we can see everybody at the same time. So you can physically raise your hand, or you can do the hand raisey thing.
And I see we've got a question from Chris to start off with. So Chris, why don't you start? And just as a housekeeping, we're going to keep it to about 5 minutes so it keeps moving. So that could be 5 short questions or 1 long question. That's all up to our speaker.
Okay, so a lot of disciplines that are more on the subjective side of the spectrum still use the trappings of science and technology and definitive argument to try to sort of prove things or claim that they've proved things. Can you talk about that tension and how, I guess pick your direction. Is it that science has infected everything? Is it that everyone is trying to claim authority they shouldn't? What's going on there, and how can we fix it?
Okay, so, and just to clarify, I took 1 intro to research class this past summer, and I'm just about to begin my graduate degree. But here's what I got. Because we came from this positive mindset of how research was pretty much until 1960s, realistically until the 1980s, you know, the idea was in order for something to be considered true and scientifically valid, it had to be measured. You had to have those numbers. Like otherwise, who's to say that what you're saying is true? Just that one guy says, oh, life is like this. You know, you can't prove it. Show me numbers. Show me something that's going to prove that's true. And then this new branch of way of thinking says, well, actually, one person's point of view does count because that's what reality is. So, and for a lot of things, I do think that those numbers are a good idea and can help. And then there are some things, especially social things, researching, yeah, absolutely, this one minority's point of view counts, you know? Whereas in like biology, that's something, yeah, I could see like medicine, you really want that positivist, you want to see those numbers, you want to see case studies that have been carefully studied. But then there's other things like how should we educate our children where, you know, numbers can help. And here's where I say the Buddha takes the middle path thing. There eventually people realize, what if we just mixed things? What if we took a little bit of each mindset? And as someone who believes in taking the middle path, I think that's the most logical choice. Some people still argue one's better than the other, but I think you got to have some numbers and some words, and it just depends on what you're studying and what you're trying to learn about.
Awesome. Another follow-up question, other question? Renata's raising her hand.
It also looks, just in the chat, has science affected everything, or are things trying to claim science's legitimacy?
Oh, that was me liking Chris's question phrasing.
Yeah, and then our methods of obtaining the numbers matter a heck of a lot too.
Yeah.
Call out to the chat. So with research, when you are thinking about the research that you're doing for music education, for music, what kinds of things are you thinking about personally? How do you determine what you're looking for and how to find out the information?
Well, I'll give you an example. For one of my projects, I learned about quantitative research, which is the numbers driven. And so I did a poll where I asked people, here's my thought, my sciencey thought, my hypothesis was, clearly, you do not need to have talent in order to pursue music, but many people believe that for some reason. Maybe it's because they didn't have experience with music in their past. I wonder if there is a correlation. Then that word is like, okay, we need quantitative numbers here. So I had people vote in a poll. I think, and then I looked at all the people who said, I think you absolutely need to have talent in order to pursue music, versus how much experience they have with music in their childhood. And this was a terrible poll. Like, it's the first time I've ever done such a thing. It would not go into a scientific journal. But the idea there was I then looked at the numbers and I said, numbers, tell me, is there a correlation? Is there a connection? And the numbers didn't tell me anything because it was a terrible, terrible scientific study. But that is an example where I would then use that number. And then at that point, I could just say that, leave that in the world, and let someone else say, oh, wow, her study shows there's a connection or no connection. And then at that point might be a good time to do a qualitative research study, a more word-based, opinion-based as to why this phenomenon is so.